Let's take a look at some business news now. It's our business segment. It's called Rands and Cents. Well, Eskom yesterday conceded that it failed the nation. The power utility indicated that load shedding could intensify over the next 5 years. And in a separate move, Eskom says it is busy with talks to tap capital markets for much needed funds. To look at all these developments, we're now joined by economist Herman Warren from The Economist. He joins me in studio. Herman, I guess it just gets worse and worse. What did you make of their press conference yesterday?
It was detailed. It was sobering. It outlined clearly what the problems were, and I think we already know what the problems are. Eskom has run its generating capacity effectively to the ground. It hasn't been doing maintenance, as I believe the CEO indicated yesterday. They abandoned that religion of being consistent with maintaining the kit, and again, using an example that he used, if you run a car without servicing it, eventually it will break down. And we're at that particular point. I also think that the can is not entirely held by Eskom. I mean, there was a government policy of keeping the lights on. Some of it, I think, was for political expediency, and the long-term viability of the generating capacity of Eskom was sacrificed on that altar. And we're grappling with that particular problem now. We know that the organization is in need of cash. Some of it is of a longer-term nature to fund the capital projects in Gula, Medupi, Kusile, etc. And some of it is of a short-term nature because the lights, to try to keep the lights on, they've been running these peaking stations, these gas turbines, which run on diesel. There are two main ones, and one gobbles over 200,000 liters of diesel an hour, and the other well over 400,000 liters an hour. So there's a short-term funding crisis that needs to be dealt with, and there's a longer-term funding crisis that needs to be dealt with. As I said, I think he laid out a lot of what we know. There still are some uncertainties as to where to from here. There's a tariff adjustment that will come through, but only kicking in the next fiscal of 7.8 billion rand, or the next fiscal year. Eskom will probably ask for a tariff adjustment at the end of the period when they can, which is in April, not when they can begin to ask for that tariff adjustment. We're still waiting to hear from government, and hopefully some clarity will come from Minister Nene when he tables his budget in Parliament around that 20 billion rand injection into Eskom, but Eskom was asking for 50. So we still have that 30 billion rand gap that we need to close, and it's a bit uncertain at this stage as to how that gap will entirely be closed.
I want to talk to you about the effects of this because we won't necessarily see the effects within the next couple of months. I mean, these are long-term effects that we can look back on. We look at 2008, and those effects are still being looked at. If I was a prospective business investor, I would be speculative.
Yeah, I agree with you. Unfortunately, if you pardon the pun, putting a power station on the grid is not like flipping a light switch. It takes a long time to get these things up and running. And as we know, it's taken longer than we would have liked because there are delays with Medupi, for example. We thought it would be online last year. That's not the case. Hopefully, we'll get the first unit up and going as per the presentation yesterday in June. Consistent power, at least one of those units. But it is not very conducive to creating confidence in a business environment to say I'm willing to invest, because in many instances, when you're laying down big investments, you need stable, reliable, accessible, and affordable power. And right now, Eskom can't guarantee that. The CEO mentioned yesterday that it's going to take as long to get out of this hole as it took to dig it. And that wasn't a quick affair. That was over many, many years. We know that we have at least 3 years that we need to put in of work to try to recover against some of the backlog of maintenance. So
it's not ideal. Have markets reacted to this, or do they react to this?
Markets do react to it. I don't believe there was any significant move on the JSE yesterday related to this press conference. I think to an extent it's been, but I think to an extent it's been priced in. I mean, this isn't new news. Yeah.
Financially, you've explained a couple of the numbers, but financially, how do we get out of this? I mean, where is the solution? We're tired of bashing Eskom. I mean, they've pretty been forthcoming in terms of the crisis. How do we get out of this?
Wow. There's a multi-layered answer and issues associated with that. I think at a higher level, hopefully it results in some introspection amongst the shareholder, in this instance government, as to how state-owned enterprises are run. Now, in the late 90s, Eskom, they're employed to run a power station. They should have that expertise. It was very clear. They communicated to government that we need to build new generating capacity. New generating capacity needs to come online or else we're going to be in a problem. They weren't listened to. Government subsequent to that had introduced this policy of we must keep the lights on at all costs. Undoubtedly, I would think any responsible manager at that stage would have said, but these are the consequences if we don't maintain the kit. But for whatever reason, those concerns, presuming they were aired, were overridden. So I think there needs to be some introspection about what the relationship is. Government is the main shareholder and they manage these things, but on what basis these things are actually managed so that they're sustainable in the long term. As you say, they're big numbers. The consumers, we're going to end up having to carry some of this burden. Undoubtedly, the tariffs are going to go up. There may be some additional cost as well with the hassles of traffic lights not working and congestion, all sorts of things. So it's not.
I mean, it has a ripple effect, as you said.
It has a ripple effect.
An increase on tariffs obviously hits every consumer. That has an effect on. Will it have an effect on things like inflation, the interest rate, those kind of things?
I think it will. It certainly will have an impact on inflation. On the other side, there's always on the one hand and on the other hand. We've got the benefit of a lower petrol price, which is going to pump. It's going to aid our disposable income. It's going to pump some additional cash into the sort of the pot to be spent in other areas. So yes, I mean.
I'm looking at Eskom as an entity. It's obviously been downgraded to junk status now. So if we carry on borrowing, we're obviously going to need to pay back more. Are we not getting ourselves into more trouble?
The credit rating has a direct impact on the cost of capital. So the lower the credit rating, the more expensive it will be for Eskom to raise capital and to service its existing capital. So,
privatization, a possibility?
I think what certainly is a possibility is to involve the private sector more in generating power. And I'm not a sector expert, but I understand that there are some regulatory related issues, possibly legislative issues that needs to be changed to allow for that effective contribution from the private sector and also from the consumer sector. I mean, you go to other countries and there's a distributed power approach. Germany, for example, they can feed power back into the grid. You can put solar panels on your house and what have you, and the sort of framework that allows that to take place from a regulatory perspective has not been completely ironed out in the South African context.
You're saying the consumers, literally, they need to also look at themselves and see how they use power.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think we all need to conserve where we can, and I think we all need to look at alternatives because load shedding will be with us for some time to come. There was a detailed schedule outlined by the CEO yesterday during his briefing, and it extended, I believe, until April. But that wasn't to say that it was going to stop in April. He made it very clear that we've got a tough climb ahead of us.
Sorry, I've got one last quick question.
Sure.
I mean, you know the markets internationally. Is this an international problem? Are other countries suffering from these type of problems?
We're not alone. That doesn't make it any better. It's unacceptable, but we're not alone. I think before I got on, you had a segment around the Nigerian election scenario, which the elections are coming up on the 14th of February. Nigeria is the largest economy in sub-Saharan Africa. Well over $500 billion. They're obviously taking some knocks because of the softer oil price. But for an economy that size, they generate about a tenth of the capacity that we generate of electricity. So it's very unstable, very erratic. So we are not alone in some of our challenges. In many ways, we're better off, but it's still not acceptable. This is a modern, sophisticated economy, and a key pillar in supporting that economy must be a reliable supply of electricity, and Eskom is that main supplier.
Herman, always appreciate your insight. Herman Warren chatting to me about the numbers, I guess, and those numbers are certainly big numbers on the back of Eskom's press briefing yesterday. It's looking likely that this problem is going to be with us for a number of years to come. Herman, always appreciate your time. Thanks for coming to chat.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Well, staying with Eskom, the power utility is in talks to raise over 350 billion rand. The utility is currently engaged in negotiations to finalize 3 large